addressing a very topical issue, I'm sure you'll agree, on how to create a coherent national level AI strategy. And we have a distinguished panel, I'm very pleased to say, to discuss this important topic. And to introduce your moderator that will lead us through this, please welcome on stage Marloes Pope, who's the International Partnerships Netherlands AI Coalition and Steering Committee European AI Forum. Please give her a warm welcome.
Good morning. I have the wonderful job of moderating this high-level panel on national AI strategies. What has worked well? What can we learn from each other? We will hear it from our honored guest. I would like to invite on stage from the Netherlands, Minister Stef Blok from the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Policy. Very warm welcome. The next guest I would like to introduce is from Estonia, Velsberg, Government Chief Data Officer. Welcome, Ott. And we do have in our midst Max Welling. He's professor at machine learning at the University of Amsterdam, but he's also senior fellow at the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research. Welcome, Max. And we do have two guests online. The first guest I would like to introduce is from the United Arab Emirates, Omar Sultan Al Olama, Minister of State for Artificial Intelligence, Digital Economy and Remote Work Applications. Welcome. And last but not least, from France, Renaud Vedel, Advisor to the Government and the Coordinator of the French National AI Strategy. Minister Blok, I would like to start with you. I would like to give you the opportunity to start with some opening statements about the Netherlands AI strategy.
Well, thank you for that. In this very historic place. Amsterdam was, of course, one of the founding places of actually capitalism. But as the word capitalism has, let's say, a mixed connotation, I prefer to say it's one of the places where innovation, debate, challenging existing order has always been at the heart of what we do. And I think that is also very relevant in the field of artificial intelligence. Because you can look at any new development either with fear, and wonder how will it change my world or my business? What's happening inside this computer? What are those algorithms doing? What's happening to my data? Those are relevant questions. But I think it's extremely important not to get paralyzed by these uncertainties, but to realize that the progress we have made in the world, or here in Amsterdam, is based on the fact that we do not stop at looking with fear and awe at new developments, but see them as opportunities to move forward. So for the Dutch government and for me personally, I really want to spread the message that we want to be a welcoming environment in the Netherlands for artificial intelligence, not only in words, but also by trying to support both academia and entrepreneurs. That, of course, we want to follow closely what will happen in relation to privacy or algorithms. We are active at the European stage, where of course, regulation is underway, but always with the background of make change possible. Don't be afraid, be at the core of the developments.
Thank you. That's a positive attitude. I would like to continue with our online guest. What does the AI strategy look like in the United Arab Emirates? And what is your opinion about regulation of AI? Is it helpful or will it slow down innovation?
Thank you very much for the question. It's an absolute pleasure being with all of you here today. I'd like to actually first echo what His Excellency Minister Blok mentioned on the two approaches when you come to looking at technology. We know that this technology is going to advance. We know that the world is becoming more and more dependent on them. And it's the role of governments to ensure that we embrace change while also be proactive in regulating the negative. In the UAE, we see that we have an advantage compared to many other countries. As you know, artificial intelligence is built on data. And it's not namely just data, it's the 3 V's of data. So volume of data, and we have huge volumes of data in the UAE. It's the velocity of data. So the cutting edge infrastructure that exists here gives us access to that data in real time. And then finally, the key advantage is the variety of data that we have. So we have 200 nationalities living and thriving in a very densely populated set of cities. So we can create AI systems and solutions that are based locally, but are able to be globally relevant from day one. And we're seeing the ecosystem of artificial intelligence in the UAE today is actually the leading ecosystem in the region and is becoming relevant globally with the inflow of talent, with the inflow of capital, and with the outflow of the solutions from the UAE to the rest of the world.
And Renaud, you're involved in the French AI strategy. What has worked well so far? And could you elaborate a bit on how can we make the transfer from science to business better in Europe?
What we are seeing now are tangible signs, I think, of rapid takeoff, although it's regrettable that the movement has been somewhat slower in Europe. And for example, one of the first acts of the French national strategy was to lift the lock on access to supercomputing for the AI scientific communities and startups. And in 18 months, the number of projects in AI has risen sharply, and the public operator now receives more than 2 applications per day. We also have the largest project hosted and supported is the world-class Big Science project. It's coordinated by a Franco-American startup, Hugging Face, and its scientific director, Thomas Wolff, lives in the Netherlands. This is a nod here to the useful and necessary close integration of our ecosystems. Another sign of European and also French take-up is venture capital. 2021 will mark a break in the access of deep tech ecosystems to venture capital in Europe, and also in the consolidation and growth of startups. And now we see that in generic support schemes for creation and growth and applied AI projects, the share of those projects that incorporate AI is steadily growing. But there's something, maybe you're right, in the transfer of science into business is still a weak point, and especially in France. The rate of patenting remains insufficient, and we need to develop that more. There's something we must undertake and succeed in. Better cross-fertilization of our own ecosystems in Europe. And we need to encourage them to engage more into intra-European cooperation. Invariably, it is the American market rather than the European one at large that is too often primarily targeted by our entrepreneurs. So there is a lot of chances here in Europe, and some consolidation opportunities are missed. And this is really a mindset that we need to think about.
I would like to continue with you. What makes the Estonian AI strategy unique?
Yes, thank you. First of all, glad to be here. So in Estonia, our strategy has been about improving people's lives, businesses, about making the government as proactive as possible. So in order to do that, we came out with our government AI strategy in 2019. And back then, we only had a couple of AI use cases in the government implemented. And we see that the government can be a forerunner, and we can lead the private sector by example. Today, 2 years after, we have implemented more than 80 projects that we consider AI. And for those of us who think that we use the term AI too simplistically, then we are concentrating on machine learning and deep learning projects. So this is how we define what is actually AI. So it is not about just streamlining people's behavior and tasks. So we have implemented AI in many ways, from predicting when people actually become unemployed, how to improve their employability, helping to streamline 991 calls and so on. And in part of doing that, we decided that we need to do everything open source if possible. So we came up with the concept of AI core components. And it has already paid off both in the public sector and private sector. Everyone are using that. So this is just a way of introducing, and also on an international level. Today we have speakers from different countries. We should more willingly share what we have done. But this is not kind of the way we want to stop. I mentioned in the beginning that we want to make the government more personalized, more proactive. So I would like to put on a small video on the screen, and I will briefly introduce what we are really talking about. Video, please.
Bureaucrat. I'm not sure what there is to talk about, really. What's so special about it anyway? All right. Bureaucrat is merely the official AI-based virtual assistant of Estonia. Honestly, it doesn't do anything that remarkable. Actually, it mostly does completely mundane and sometimes even boring stuff, such as applying for a permit, renewing your identification, or recording lost documents, applying for family benefits, or borrowing a book for school, standing up for consumer rights, dealing with a fender bender, notifying of vaccinations, identifying mushrooms, and 1,000 other boring things. Now that you've listened to all this, you're probably wondering what you will do with all the free time on your hands. Well, who would know? Who would know?
It's the perfect weather for a day at the beach. I'd recommend taking the electric scooter and hopping on a bus.
With the help of Estonia's virtual assistant, Bureaucrat, you won't lose any more time solving everyday problems. Pick your preferred device to interact with Bureaucrat and get everything done through one communication channel.
How can I help you?
So as a final word, we are trying to really reinvent how the governments work and function. And Bureaucrat is going to be live in this year, December. So we are already 2 years working on this specific project. So everything is open source. If someone wants to collaborate, feel free. We are also willing to kind of look how we can share public services across different member states as well.
Thank you. I love the way Estonia works on digitization, and with this example, yeah, you're showing that you're one of the front runners, within the government on this topic. So thank you.
Thank you.
Max, you're one of our best AI experts in the Netherlands, but you're also involved in the Canadian strategy. How did that happen?
Well, around I would say 10 years ago or so, the Canadian government decided that deep learning was a transformative technology. This was because they had some of the best researchers in the field, like Jeff Hinton and Joshua Benjo, all came from Canada. And they started to invest in this field, and they decided also to create sort of a world council of people that would come to Canada and talk about this technology, and I was invited to be there.
Great. And what can we learn from the Canadian strategy, and what can Europe learn from this?
So I think Canada has been very early in this game, in this sort of AI sort of game. In 2017, they formulated their own pan-Canadian AI strategy, which was, I think, one of the first countries which came out with a big AI strategy. And it's basically based on 4 pillars. The first pillar is AI ecosystems. So they decided it's sort of a spokes and hub model, where there's 3 big hubs, one in Edmonton, Alberta, one in Toronto, Ontario, and there's one in Montreal, Quebec, based basically where these famous researchers were. and they were investing and making those ecosystems grow. The second one is around talent. So they have a CIFAR AI research chairs program, and there's about 100 or so research. Half of them was coming from abroad, so there's this new influx of talent, and half of them are, Canadians who were or were already in these institutions. And then there were two more programs, one on training, so they have lots of summer schools and, catalyst grants and, all sorts of other programs, conferences in order to sort of train a new sort of pipeline of talents, and they have by now trained about 1,200 new students in deep learning. And then the final one is thought leadership in responsible AI, and so they have an AI council in Canada domestically, but they're also part of the global partnership on AI internationally.
Right. And we have someone from the Dutch government on board. What would be your advice to the Dutch government, but maybe also to Europe? How can we excel, or how can we become better in the transfer, like I asked to Renaud, the transfer from the universities to business, but also what could make the Netherlands unique?
Those are very great questions. I'm happy to address them. So we have already built the European Lab for Learning and Intelligence Systems in Europe. So this is a hub of 30 units across Europe where the best of talent in machine learning is located. We have a number of programs, among which also a PhD program centered around AI talent, and we have research programs, and we appoint fellows, which are the best researchers in the world. So we have 3 of these units in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, in Nijmegen, and in Delft, and this could be a very easy start for us to sort of invest in an Alice Institute, maybe. There's also a very good model domestically that was sort of homegrown in Amsterdam, which is called Innovation Center for AI. These are labs with 5 to 10 PhD students, which are fully funded by industry. This is about an investment between $2 and $3 million for or euros, I should say, for 5 to 10 students. And we now already have 30 of those labs across the Netherlands. And it's so successful because there is a transfer of knowledge between the researchers in academia and the researchers in the companies, and there is also the possibility to buy IP. And so I feel this is growing. There's 17 more going through the Groeifonds, and I feel it's very successful public-private partnership.
Right. Would you like to reflect on this?
Well, I'm very happy that I heard a lot of enthusiasm about the way we perform things in the Netherlands. But of course, this is a very competitive environment. Apparently, Canada is doing even better. Estonia, I might even say, since its rebirth, has been on the edge of applying IT within society. Which is always very inspiring, but of course each country and society has its own peculiarities, and not everything that you apply will work out the same way in the Netherlands. I think there are 2 main tasks for the government. The first is to help scientists be on the edge. Of course, we have no endless taxpayer wallets, but allocate part of the government budget both to fundamental and applied research in this field. The second is use AI, modern technologies, in what the government does. For instance, we have a huge infrastructure trying to keep dry here in our swamp at the end of the Rhine River. That requires huge maintenance and surveying of our dikes and infrastructure. That's one of the fields where artificial intelligence might come in handy. We are looking to be one of the most affluent but also crowded countries in the world. that brings special challenges with his living together, using energy, producing waste. Handling all of this in a sustainable way requires artificial intelligence for the benefit of us, but if you apply it in a wise way, for the benefit of the world, and there might even be some profit in it to be made.
Thank you. I would like to give the audience the opportunity to raise a question to any of the panelists. Is there someone, yeah, over there?
Thank you very much. I'm Henny Huygens. I'm a researcher at the Hogeschool Utrecht. And I was wondering, Max Welling told us a very inspiring story about the ICAI labs, industry academia constructions that do very great research. But my question is, and it's mainly addressed to Minister Stef Blok, why is the government not funding these labs and participating in these labs? It's only left to academia and industry here. It's my opinion.
It's hard to hear.
To be honest, I'm not involved in every euro the government spends, so I'm
You're
not.
not?
No, not every.
Okay.
So I'm not into detail aware of our funding streams towards this specific lab. What I am aware of is that my ministry has substantial funds for R&D, especially applied R&D, and that artificial intelligence is benefiting from the special growth fund that the Dutch government has created. So even if a specific lab currently is not participating in it, there certainly are possibilities, but of course always on a competitive base. There are always more ideas and requests for public funding than can be helped, but I think that's also part of progress, that you work on a competitive base.
And I agree, I think the growth funds will provide a lot of new opportunities. Another question from the audience over here.
Yes, hello, I'm Wouter from firm Spark Optimus. I have a question about how companies or how governments can collaborate to create value for society at large, rather than only their specific countries.
Maybe you want to answer this question?
Yeah, I can. So I will just share Estonian experience. Everything that we have done so far is actually done in collaboration with private sector and universities. The government itself, it's kind of typical, is not that big, so we are relying on everything that we do on private sector. When it comes to Estonia, then we try to kind of make sure that we have kind of the foundation. For instance, when we talk about language technology, then in every project that we fund, we make sure that they are available as open data. So, for instance, if big companies want to produce their own machine translation software or voice recognition, so on, then we have all the necessary requirements. And I would just like to cherish that the European Commission came out with the high-value data set as part of Open Data Directive. And in order to improve kind of private sector development of AI, we made it mandatory, kind of introduced new high-value data set. So from next year, all language data that the government produces is considered high value and need to be in a certain format, free of charge to everyone, the whole public. So that's just one of the ways.
Okay, thank you. We do have time for one final question. Anyone? Over there? Sorry, you have to run.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for your talk, first of all. I had a question. We heard from Dr. Kai-Fu Lee this morning how China is possibly becoming the leading force in AI. So my question is, to what extent are you worried about this trend, and how does it influence the formulation of your national strategies for AI?
Can you repeat the question? We couldn't hear it correct.
Very brief. China.
Yeah.
Okay, you can help me out.
I'm just going to repeat the question. So the leading role of China, how we try to kind of make sure that the same problems don't happen in our national strategies. So as part of Estonian strategy, just making quick to give others a chance as well, we try to be as transparent as possible in the way government processes data. For instance, we have data consent management system, so citizens actually can give consent to private sector and universities for them to use government health data. We have data tracker as well, so giving full transparency how government processes data in the government portal. So these are just some of the ways, and also of course, data privacy impact assessment and so on. Would you like that?
I do indeed think that transparency is the key. I understand your point and maybe also worries about Chinese influence. I don't think we should try to close Europe and the European market to any foreign influence, but we should regulate AI and other developments in a wise way. And wise, in my opinion, is not to be too fearful. That was part of my opening statement. And I think an important task for the Netherlands, together with other countries, we have close cooperation with France, is making sure, and Estonia of course, is making sure that European regulation at the same time doesn't stifle development, but make sure that misuse of data or lack of transparency is not the way we want to do business in Europe. And then it is not specifically targeted at China. It are general rules about the way we want to deal with innovation and we want to do business in Europe. Anyone that wants to participate in science or business in this way is welcome, but we set the rules.
Thank you.
I'm just going to quickly add that I completely agree that right now European Commission is approaching AI as something bad, but at the same time it has a lot of potential and we should concentrate on the important things. For instance, data governance, making sure that the data that we actually use can be used for the reasons. So we should have a more practical approach on how we carry out projects instead of worrying about everything. That's kind of not directly at the question.
Thank you. I would like to give our online panelists the opportunity to reflect on this. And then we have to close this panel session. Renaud, any words from your side?
Yes, I think we can do many things. That is a reality that in Europe, one of the bottlenecks is access to data. And in some applications like education for EdTech or health, even personal data is necessary for AI to grow. And so we will need more sandboxes. We need more flexibility on this without reneging on our values. But I think the data markets and institutions and third-party trustworthy are necessary. That's also another thing we need to do is that our industrial base is mainly with complex and critical systems, and we definitely need to revise engineering certification schemes that are very difficult to do, but statistical AI is a challenge. And so that's why we also make a lot of effort on this, because we need our industrial base to be very able to incorporate AI to enrich their products and services. That's a challenge, and I think we should do it together, all Europeans and other countries as well, in order to be able to compete not only on the consumer market, but also on the industrial heavy market.
Yeah, I fully agree. Omar, some final words from your side?
Yes, the first thing I would say is I would urge everyone not to think of it from a European scope specifically, because as we know that this technology will keep moving forward, will keep advancing as we look at inputting more data and bringing more talent. So China is, yes, being seen as one of the leaders today in the world, but I think that Europe is also a leader. I think that Israel is a leader. I think that Singapore is a leader. And if we don't come together, if we don't know what we're doing on all fronts, we're going to have these blind spots that might actually come out tomorrow and harm us all, or even create an unfair advantage for certain parties. So the first thing I would say is we need to actually have an open dialogue with all players. I actually push strongly that we have an open dialogue with China to see what China is doing and try to understand how we can either benefit from it and learn, or what is of concern that we need to tell them to address. The same is true as well, by the way, for the US. The same is true for the UAE and for Europe. So the first thing is we need to have a constant dialogue. The second is I do not think that there is going to be one leader for AI. What is going to happen is we're going to have hotspots of excellence. So there are certain things that China is very advanced in, and I think that they do have a lot of money being poured into these endeavors and a lot of research being done. But there are certain things that the US today is in first place with no threat to their dominance. There are, if we look at industrial AI, for example, Germany is today the leader and is going to continuously be a leader in this space, whether it's infusing robotics or looking at software specifically. And in the cyberspace, we have Israel, who's today a leader in it. So it's never going to be a zero-sum game. It's not going to be one person or one country going to win and everyone else is going to lose out. There is going to be a balance. And the more we collaborate, the more we have this open dialogue, the better it is for everyone.
This time, I want to thank all the panelists for joining us today. And I know you have to leave immediately, but you are here today, so feel free to catch them during the networking session. And thank you so much.